And what about seeds and nuts? So seeds, we have sesame, sunflower, chia, flax, pumpkin, hemp, organic, raw. Are we saying they're all good all the time? And when it comes to nuts, are there certain raw organic nuts that we're saying you can have too many? How should we, with celery, there's no limit, eat as much as you can. When it comes to seeds and nuts, is moderation better? How much do you recommend? Is it okay to just eat as we want?
Why don't I tackle that first? Is that I think that we're very clear here that people can overeat calories in general, and overeating calories can put more fat on your body, and more fat on the body is not health favorable. So the question isn't about really eating more seeds and nuts, it's whether you're overeating calories in general. And sometimes you have to watch your seed and nut intake so your level of calories is not over the amount you should be eating each day. So, but in any case, given the framework that we're agreeing that either moderate caloric restriction or body weight plays a role in health, we shouldn't be over-consuming any foods that leads to obesity or overweight or an overweight condition. That said, eating nuts with meals in a moderate amount is part of a whole healthy diet. Whether your diet has a little more fat or a little less fat, or a little more nuts or a little less nuts, as long as the calorie content is favorable, shouldn't affect your health and may even be an important factor to improve your health, to have a little more nuts and seeds, as long as the calories are favorable. So it's not something you have to really moderately restrict, it's that your overall diet, because when you're putting the nuts in as a substitute nutrient, in other words, I'm putting a little more nuts, I'm eating a little less potato, I'm eating less rice, I'm eating less of something else. So I'm still keeping my calories relatively favorable, and there's no problem with eating those nuts. Nuts have a bad rap for no legitimate reason, but excess calories deserve the bad rap.
I couldn't agree more with what Joel just said, and of course I just ran down about eating nuts regularly is going to give you, every day is going to give you a 20% decrease in your mortality rate. That's a pretty good thing. According to your constitution, some people can have more nuts and seeds and actually do better, and some people can do less. However, I'm going to use the word mTOR pathway, and it basically speaks to between 35 and 70 grams of protein gives you optimum anti-cancer and longevity. So you never want to overdo it. 70 grams isn't a whole lot for people who need more protein, and 35 for people who don't need. I'm a kind of more low protein person because my constitution does better with that. So I think there's a range, and if we keep in that range, we're going to get support of optimum health, longevity, and cancer prevention. That's the only thing I would add to it. Some people have liver gallbladder troubles. Okay, fine. Don't eat a lot of nuts and seeds because a lot of people have digestive problems. But aside from that kind of thing, you have to find the right range according to your constitution. But it's an essential part, from my point of view, of a healthy diet.
And I would add a couple of things. First is that I think Dr. Fuhrman has mentioned this in his lectures as well, but certainly nuts and seeds nuts in particular have about 600 to 800 calories a cup. And so it is possible to overeat them, but we probably absorb about 25% less calories from nuts and seeds than what you see on any chart. So you lose some in your stool. The other thing I would say about nuts and seeds is that a lot of people, the nuts and seeds they consume are not in an ideal form. So often they're coated in chocolate, or they're covered in salt, or they're covered in sugar. And so when we talk about nuts and seeds, we're really, the best you can do with nuts, for example, would be to soak them, sprout them, dehydrate them, and rather than roasting them, which can produce some acrylamide and products of oxidation, most of the studies on nuts and showing beneficial effects don't distinguish. They are using roasted nuts. They're still valuable. But to make them the most valuable, you want to reduce anti-nutrients, release stored forms of nutrients, and not add to the acrylamide content and so forth. So that's one thing. And then the second thing I'd want to say is with seeds, you want to make sure, now seeds are actually more nutrient dense than nuts. So they have more protein, they have more trace minerals, more iron, more zinc generally than what you would get from a similar amount of nuts. So they're about probably 12 to 15% of calories from protein, whereas nuts are more in the 5 to 8% range. So the other thing that you want to think about is when you're doing your mix of nuts and seeds, you want to make sure that some of those are rich in omega-3 fatty acids. So seeds, a lot of seeds are rich in omega-6s, and as vegetarians, we're relying on conversion, at least somewhat, and we want to make sure we have a source of omega-3 if we're not obviously eating fish. So including some chia, hemp, flax, some walnuts is a good idea in that mix.
Very good. And can you imagine that? That's made a really important point you just made that nobody considers, that the nut studies showing that how beneficial they are at extending lifespan are done on roasted nuts, and they still show incredible benefits. You know what I mean? Imagine if they really did them on the healthier nuts. It just gives more support to what we're saying.
Yeah. And in supporting what Brenda's saying too, we always soak our nuts and seeds. It gets out the anti-hemoglutins and antitrypsin factors, which block your digestion there. So we always soak them, throw away that water, and that makes them a lot more digestible as well.